Okay, welcome guys to lesson 3 of chapter 1, and in this lesson we're going to have a look at how the president is chosen, so the US election process, and then the parties that presidents tend to represent, the two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. Okay, so how is the president chosen? Let's kick off with that. So there are primaries and there are caucuses, and these are essentially kind of votes nearly in each state. So each party will hold one in each state and they will choose their candidates for that particular state. Okay. These events determine the delegates who will support a candidate at the party's national convention. Okay. The National Convention is essentially where the delegates from each state officially nominate their candidate for president. So there will be obviously a number of delegates from, many different states for the Republicans, for example, and then at the National Convention, the kind of people that they might think should go for president will be nominated there. Okay, the candidate then chooses a running mate for vice president at that convention. So another important way, obviously, in which the president is chosen in the US is via general election, okay? So the general election in the US is held every 4 years on the first Tuesday in November, all right? And citizens vote for their preferred candidate in the election, all right? However, they are technically voting for electors pledged to that candidate, okay? So they're obviously voting for, people to be in the House of Representatives, whether they are Republican or whether they are Democrat, and obviously then, as a result, then, the kind of Republican or the Democrat nominee will get elected then, as well. All right. Obviously, how this is chosen is by electoral college. Okay. Electoral college is essentially the point system in the US voting elections. All right. So essentially, how it works is each state has a number of electors based on its representation in Congress. Okay. So senators plus representatives, okay? Every state has 2 senators. So every state will have at least 2 points, okay? The candidate who wins the majority of the votes in that state wins that state's electoral votes. So to win the presidency, you've got to hit 270, okay? That's the magic number, okay? 538 in total, all right? That's your 100, that's your 100 senators and then your 438 House of Representative members. Okay. Now, different states have different points as well. So, winning certain states can net you certain amounts of points, can win you more points than other states. For example, Texas is worth 40 points. Okay. It's got your 2 senators and then it's got 38 House of Representative members as well because it's quite a big state. California is worth 54 points. It's got 2 senators and it's got 52 representatives, but a smaller state, let's say like Vermont, is only worth 3 points. Okay, so winning that is not as important, if you will. It can be in a very close election, but certain states are worth more points than others. So, who does the president represent? Okay, ultimately, of course, they represent all citizens. Okay, they represent all American citizens, but their policies often reflect the interests of those who have elected them. Okay, so obviously there's quite a lot of division in America between, if you're red or blue, for example. Let's look at what that means. What does it mean to be, red or blue, to be a Republican supporter or a Democratic supporter? So, the Democratic Party, founded 1828, it supports social progress and economic reform. Here are some key aspects attributed to the Democratic Party. So, it is very progressive in its policies, okay? It supports social justice and equality, civil rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and gender equality as well. It also prioritizes social welfare, so government programs that help vulnerable people, okay? So Obamacare, for example, which is essentially affordable healthcare for everybody. Social security, which is kind of like social welfare here in Ireland. And of course, unemployment benefits as well for those that are, a little bit less well off. They also favour policies that promote economic equality and support for the middle class, so higher minimum wages, strong labour unions, okay? They also tend to prioritise environmental protection, so regulations to reduce carbon emissions, promote renewable energy, and protect natural resources. And they're very big on this idea of a public healthcare system where everybody has access to the same style of healthcare. We look at the Republicans then, also known as the GOP, the Grand Old Party, and it was founded in 1854, around 20 odd years after the Democratic Party. It supports conservative principles. It emphasises limited government and individual liberties. Let's look at, I suppose, really at what that means. So they support traditional values, law and order, and a strong national defense. They're big on kind of military spending. They tend to favor a smaller federal government. They believe that free market capitalism leads to the most efficient and prosperous society. They support lower taxes, the deregulation of business, and reducing government spending. Okay? Most importantly, and the biggest differences between the Republicans and Democrats are their social policies, their healthcare. Okay? So Republicans tend to promote traditional family values and may oppose the likes of abortion or same-sex marriage. So a big difference now to the Democrats. They advocate for individual responsibility and personal freedom. However, where they're also very different is their idea that they believe that the likes of the Affordable Health Care Act is not sustainable. They believe actually that choice in the healthcare market, being able to, pay for healthcare, being able to get, to pay for better healthcare, I should say, will ultimately drive down costs and improve the quality of healthcare as well. So quite different. They're also, I suppose, supportive of economic development and energy independence, but they don't particularly like the idea of, we should only focus on, renewable energy, etc. Okay. They also prioritize a strong national defense and are happy enough with increased military spending. Again, quite different to the Democrats. Okay. So Republicans and Democrats, very, kind of key. I suppose there are a number of key differences, mainly in the areas of healthcare and social policy. So a couple of key questions to look back on. This one is in relation to the last lesson. I want you guys to try and cast your minds back to this very important question. Name 3 roles of the US president. So, the commander-in-chief of the US Army, they're head of the executive branch, and they're the leader of their political party. Speaking of parties, let's look at 3 key policies of the Democratic Party. Can you remember any of their policies? Well, they support social justice and equality. This includes civil rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and gender equality. They are very big on healthcare programs like Obamacare, affordable healthcare, social security, and unemployment benefits. And finally, they're big on increased funding for public education, reducing student debt, and making higher education more affordable and accessible. In contrast, let's look at 3 key policies of the Republican Party. Can you remember any of their policies or beliefs? Well, lower taxes, deregulation of business, and reduce government spending. They're big on traditional family values. They might oppose abortion rights or same-sex marriage. And finally, they are very prominent on increased military spending and national defense. See you guys in the next lesson.
If you like this video, you'll love our notes. You can get some for free in the link in the description of this video.